I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5 o'clock. Can we do the roll call, please?
Chris Bruin. Ray Lapinus.
Here.
Connie Machini. Here. Carolyn Schofield.
Here.
Lindsay Keisman.
Here. All right, is there any public comment? Seeing none, I will move on for an approval of the minutes of the May 13th, 2025 Finance and Audit meeting. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Okay, and a second? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? No? Okay. Approval of the minutes. We'll move on to the Treasurer's Report, 4A Finance Report for the period ending May 31st, 2025. Mel, can you do that one?
Okay, nothing really to point out on the balance sheet for page 1. On the administrative expense report, just one thing I wanted to point out, and that is we are over budget for legal services. So that's something we kind of need to keep an eye out for and kind of limit only using them when we really need to, I guess. Everything else is pretty much on track for the year for administrative expenses. On the next page, the revenue expense report. Nothing really to point out there. We still have a few lines we haven't hit yet as far as like things haven't been billed out yet for some of the contracts. And then moving on to the fee-for-service report. Just wanted to point out, I projected out the sales tax revenue so far in the 3 months we have received. And based on what we've gotten, I'm looking at us getting a little above the $10 million. Of course, you know, that's subject to change because every month's a different amount, but right now we're looking good in the 3 months we've gotten.
Just tell people to spend.
Just tell people, yeah. Then one other thing I want to point out, Alexian Brothers, the neurodevelopmental therapist position, we did end that program on 3/31. They were unable to fill that position within the contract terms. So that money has gone back into unallocated client services. And that is all I have for the regular finance packet. Any questions? No? Okay, then moving on. The next page is the opioid reports. Only really one thing to report in on that. Northern Illinois Recovery, there were some audit findings, so there was a little bit of recoupment. Typically what's going to happen now is now that money's brought back in and they can use it again for other services, just not the ones we found an issue with. And then we're still waiting on information from New Directions before they can submit their capital funding affidavit. So that's all I had for that, unless somebody had a question.
Okay, all right, seeing none, we'll move on to, there's no old business, we'll move on to new business. On 6A, the available funding and funding priorities. So I wanted to start off tonight with a conversation just when the mid-year concept started. I think we had a totally different vision for it than we might currently have. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference between our fee-for-service types of requests and our capital types of requests that come in, kind of what our priorities are. As far as when we have a pool of money, and I know that Mel put together on page 12 of 15 our unallocated funds and the amounts that we do have to award. And at the same time, as we're all aware, there was a capital request that kind of came in separately from that. So because of the timing, I don't think that they can be totally separate conversations. So I wanted to just see if, as a finance committee, my understanding had been that we were going to first and foremost try to focus mid-year allocation dollars on fee-for-service providers that were going to have a gap based on their current spending and where they were at. So I wanted to see if anybody felt strongly in a different direction or wanted to open it up about, prioritizing capital above fee-for-service.
I agree with
Carolyn? That's good.
And I agree, and I will say, I also,
Here, hold on a second. I have her mic on, but it's not on.
not green.
Is there another mic that Carolyn could have?
There you
Oh,
go.
there
I
we
knew
go.
it was something that I needed to do right there.
Oh,
There we
okay.
go.
Sorry about
Sorry about
that.
that. I was looking at that light. So I agree that, we do need to, in particular, I think it was for both. I mean, I think that when we did it, we were looking at both, filling, if there was, the need was greater than what they were given originally for their allocations. But I do think we also had the discussion on the capital piece, like if something came up, because I think about, I know this one came up, but I know, I look at, if, when Clearbrook has come up in the past, and they come up, and sometimes you need to take advantage of those opportunities at the same time when they come up, or it's too late. So I think the intent was for both, is kind of the impression I got when we originally discussed it, is looking at it, yes, let's fill it if we can for the need that still occurs, but then also if there's some situation that has popped up that needs to be addressed kind of in the immediate future, that we would entertain that as well. So I do think they need to be considered at the same time, but I don't know that I would exclude one from the conversation at this point.
Yeah. Connie, do you want to press your button?
Well, sorry. I agree with Carolyn, but I think we need to look at service more than capital. If there's a need for more service to the people in McHenry County, we need to look at that at our mid-year. More than, not that it excludes the capital, but that's more important. So I agree with what you were saying.
Ray, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that it's important to maintain for the fee for services to keep the integrity of the programs. Given capital requests, you got to kind of balance how many individuals are being assisted by the amount of dollars being spent. And usually capital requests are smaller per person, bang for the buck, so to speak.
I think what's complicated for this is, we technically are open to receive a capital request at any time. I mean, people can make a request anytime they want. This one just happens to be aligned with our mid-year conversation. And, I guess I just want to forecast this out. It's had this come in a month, right? We probably would have already done mid-year allocations based on the applications that came in. And the only way we would have done this is if there were other, dollars that we found, or if we wanted to dip into our fund balance. So it's sort of an interesting situation whether or not we want to, ask people to put it into that particular time of year. We had said we didn't want to limit it to mid-year allocations because when these come up, they come up. So asking people to wait for capital just doesn't actually always work. So it's been an interesting thing for me. I mean, where I stand on it is I have seen capital projects that without our money would fail to launch, for lack of a better way of explaining it, and that I think, are an awesome long-term infrastructure in our community that is hard to even with the dollars in one say, okay, it's only this many people that we serve, but how many people will it serve, over the course of 20 years with that capital, dollar. So for me, every one of them is unique and interesting, but as we're looking to kind of be really fiscally responsible and probably not be, hopefully, dipping into our fund balance very often, I think we have to really make sure that anytime we prioritize that over fee-for-services, that it has to really be necessary and valuable. And I don't think you can take capital as a concept and say we're going to always make it a second priority, but I have a hard time thinking that I wouldn't put fee-for-service first most of the time. That's kind of where I land. So as it relates to today, the reason I wanted to have this discussion is, it's supposed to be our time to review the mid-year allocations and the applicants that came in, and that capital request isn't a part of that. It's separate from that, but I do want you all to keep in mind that we have the dollars as of, I think, June 6th that were available to be spent. So if, as a finance committee, we are trying to stay within the budget that we have given ourselves this year and not dipping into fund balance, then those are the dollars, whether it's through mid-year or capital, that we should try to stay within. So. Were you?
Yeah, I was clicking myself.
Oh, okay. You were already on. All right. Go ahead, Connie.
Well, I think the sheet that Mel put in to our packet with the recommendations, is that what you're talking about versus?
Yes, so that would be item 6B. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
if there's any additional just conversation about general conceptual, hey, what would we prioritize over another, we can continue that conversation. Otherwise, we could move on to.
Well, I think it's true. I mean, it depends on what the capital is. If the capital happens to be a furnace, for example, you're not going to wait to have people wait for a furnace. But I think that services come before capital, but not always. And so I agree with what you're saying. And I was looking at then what was recommended for our mid-year funding. And I think that Mel and the staff here have done a great job. And we have to trust how they've looked at things, and we have this spreadsheet. So personally, I don't have a problem with anything that they've recommended, and I know they've taken a lot of time looking at it.
Yeah.
So thank you. I really do appreciate it.
Let's move on to 6B then, the mid-year funding request. So all of you should have received, I did ask this to get emailed out in advance. So they were looking for instruction as staff on how to kind of determine what to look at, and I had asked staff to come together and give at least, their recommendations for programs that they were going to recommend, ones that they just wouldn't recommend, their explanation for why, and to give, this was just my instruction to them, I want 3 different scenarios for how you would spend these dollars, and then left it all up to them to have to figure out what those 3 scenarios would be. So I will, one of the things I want to note before I'll hand it over to the staff is that it is important to note that of the requests that came in, they encompassed our mental health and IDD communities, and there was not a substance use program that they recommended. So all of these services, because sometimes that's a question that comes up, is, across the different sectors that we're supposed to serve. So Mel, do you want to walk us through this and your recommendations as a staff?
Sure. I don't know if you want me to touch first on the ones we decided not to fund?
Yeah, I think that'd be a great place to
Okay,
start.
so there were 14 programs that submitted requests for funding, a total of over $1.127 million. And as you saw, we have a little over 450-some thousand to distribute. So on all of them, we kind of looked at the original amount awarded, the amount of additional funding they're requesting, and then kind of compare that to what we're projecting as far as what their utilization would be. And so we came up with, first, one criteria, we kind of eliminated a few where we saw that we didn't feel the need was really there. The first one is consumer credit counseling. We're coming up, they're asking for $3,500 in additional funding. We're showing that they're going to be short about $1,400. At this time, we just don't think the need is there to give them additional funding. Then the next one was PADS case management, and I'm showing that they'll be slightly under what we originally awarded them and that they didn't need additional funding. Then the next one was Rosecrans Interpreting Services. Also, again, I'm showing they're not going to spend, everything that was allocated to them. And I'm sorry, there was 5, not 4. And then the next are 2 programs from Turning Point, Court Victim Advocates and Partner Abuse Treatment. And the interesting thing about Turning Point is every year they go through all their funding by June, July, and they've never requested more funding from them. This year they have, and their reasoning is they want less reliance on federal funds and they don't want to hit their reserves. They really didn't say that they don't have the funding that they've had in the past. And, if you look at their budget, they have like over $1 million in federal funding to support the court victim advocates. And we even saw that they had a profit in that program last year. So that one, the sheer volume of claims they put through, it's really hard to support with the funds we have available. So, and the fact that they do have other funding, we kind of said no to giving them additional funding for that program. And then the same thing, the Partner Advocate Program, one, they weren't really showing that much of a need. They were looking for an extra $7,900. But this is a program that's supported 82% by client service fees and other federal funding. So the program's really not relying on us. They do have other funds available. So those were the 5 programs we decided we wouldn't be funding. I don't know if anybody has any questions or want more clarification about those before we go further. Okay. So then the next options we came in, well, what if we gave everybody an equal percentage of, their ask, and where would we come up with? And the magic number was 68%. If we gave everybody 68% of their requests, we would come within $2,000 of what we have available if all of the available funds were put towards fee-for-service. The next column, we basically looked at, okay, what are they asking for and what are we showing as additional funds needed, and what would that, the lesser of those 2 be? And basically, if we were to give them the lesser of what we projected as utilization or what they projected as needed utilization, we were looking at, we would need an extra almost $200,000 in funding to meet those requests if we were to fully fund everybody based on what we thought their utilization was going to be. And then the third column made IDD a priority, where we funded the 2 IDD requests at 100%, and then, 100% of our projected utilization, the lower of our projected utilization are theirs. And then everybody else got a 59% allocation. So that one was kind of thrown in there because we've seen a lot of interest in the IDD funding as far as people trying to get into programs. And with the funding, Pioneer Center said they could add 10 more clients. Clearbrook was basically just being able to fund the existing clients they have. But that's kind of why we went in that direction with that one. But overall, I think the recommendation was to more go for the column A, where everybody kind of gets an equal percentage. So that's kind of what we came up with. So any questions on that?
Hold on. She was recommending the column M as in Mary for 68%.
Yeah,
I'm gonna-
option A.
Or what?
It's option.
Oh, option A, sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Carolyn.
Thanks, and I really appreciate all of the work and all the options. I love options. I'm curious, the column that I had piqued my curiosity the most is your projected utilization. Are you basing that like on their current and how you're projecting out to the months?
Basically, it was services through April. So you take the average of those for the number of months, which would have been 5, and then multiply that by 12. That's
Okay.
basically how you kind of come up with their average for the months of data we have and just project it out. And, that changes it. They might not consistently have that same number of clients. There might be more clients. They might have higher utilization, lower utilization, but you work with what you got. So that's kind of how we base ours on.
And having I did not read and compare, but did you notice anybody saying that that was not an appropriate way of doing it? Like if they're saying they're going to be adding is why they're requesting fee-for-service, or they've seen a peak, or they're going to be seeing a peak? or-
In most cases, it was just continued funding. Like Pioneer Center said they could add 10 more clients, but I was looking at numbers based on their current 36 clients and saw that they were going to utilize all the funds they had. So I don't know how, even with that extra money, they'd do 10 more clients. But I, got confirmation from Frank that they could do 10 more clients. So, but yeah, for the most part, it's continuing with the same, or, in some cases, just depending on the type of, programming, it is additional clients, but in most cases, just maintaining.
So I really appreciate that number, because to me, that's a real number. And so I actually I have a preference for a column B, because, or the funding option recommendation B, for that reason. You're taking real numbers and you're projecting that out, and then you're saying, okay, where's that gap going to be? That to me seems
The only
like a
problem
real
is now
gap.
coming up with the additional funding, so.
Well,
that's-
right,
yeah.
and I think that that's something we can talk about, is how we
Exactly.
want to utilize that. That's a good problem to have. Because I've seen this on both sides. I've applied for funding, and I've been a reviewer of many funding things, and I just know, you're supposed to always shoot high. So just taking a blanket 68%, to me, doesn't necessarily, it's not equitable. It's not necessarily fair for those that did shoot high, those that gave you a realistic number. Now those that really needed that number, you're cutting them by 68%, but those that overestimated by 50%, you're actually now meeting where they wanted to be. So it's kind of a game, I feel like, sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the numbers, in no case are we giving them more than we're projecting. So it's kind of like A's lower than B's for all of them, so it's kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I just think that the numbers that you used and then projected from, unless I see otherwise, or unless you have another reason to believe otherwise, to me, that looks like there was some sort of formula used for that there was some sort of real-life number that then was used to project that out. And then seeing that gap of where they were funded at and where that projection would be, I just think is a much more logical way of completing and using. So that's just my preference for that reason, unless, anyone else has or wants to convince me otherwise.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands that to do that process requires us spending $200,000 additional dollars above and beyond the actual dollars we have. That would mean us pulling from fund balance or pulling from somewhere else. I think the number, if you look at the lower column, is 199,258. So so she's showing us what she believes is projected, which really what that's saying is we can see with our eyes these programs do have needs. Those needs are about $200,000 more than the money that we have in the mid-year. So
Sorry, I'm turned off that.
oh, yeah, here. No, I just want to, because
Thank you for clarifying.
No, go ahead.
And I'm fine finding where to reduce, but I'd prefer to use that column to kind of start with. Just because I think even if you then want to take that number and take whatever percentage of that number, I'd rather do that, just because, and I don't know if it'll get us to the same place or not, but I just think it's a better starting point, because there's actually a process. There's actual real numbers that were there, rather than just a random percentage.
Connie.
Well, I think they took a lot of time doing this, and I know that, for example, Pioneer and Clearbrook, it's that warrant of need, and you can't believe the letters and calls that I got because their kids are not being served. And so I see that as being and you looked at that with the warrant of need, and I'm glad you did. I get what you're saying, but I think that we don't want to take from our fund balance. This was what do we have mid-year? And column A, and they did a really good job of it. I'm more in favor of that right now because it adds more clients, and the letters and calls that I get, and I think I shared one of the letters with some of the board members. Yeah, that there's no way their child can get in because we have not given any warrant of need. And this does give more money into the warrant of need. So I'm more in favor of staying in what they're recommending, A.
Okay. I want to just make sure that I understand the discussion earlier from Carolyn, if I may, that conceptually you like the idea of using our numbers of projection. And while this is 100% of our projection, that you could also see an option where we would reduce that percentage so that we got it down by 200,000 as a suggested alternative to the columns that exist. Is that an accurate summary? I just want to make sure that I'm
Nope, and I'm running the math right now. It looks like 70% then of like those numbers.
Okay.
But I'd rather start with numbers that actually have meaning than just like a random number, because it did look like in some areas, like the requested amount was a little off from where the projected, I mean, there were some differences.
There were some.
Yeah. So I guess it just puts everyone on the same playing field then, when you do it based on our projections, based on, their projections, which are out of line with our projections.
Well, in some instances, our projection was higher than theirs, and I limited it to theirs, so they're,
Oh, okay.
yeah, they're not necessarily on the same playing field because I didn't go with all of them, our projection. I went with the
Okay.
lower of the two, so.
I'd rather start with those than having a random 68%.
Okay.
So it looks like I didn't run it up, but it looks like right around 70%, if we took 70% of those numbers. And I didn't run it yet, I apologize, but I can do it real quick.
I was going to say, I don't think this is, she could probably do it on the spreadsheet in front of us.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that I.
And it gets them a little higher, probably, the first one I do, it gets them a little bit higher than the number in column A. It gets them higher, actually, than both. So I just think it will capture maybe little ones here and there that are more accurate. But that's just me.
Mel, can you speak to any of the funded programs? Do they have or the recommended programs here? I know some of our programs are very seasonal. Are any of these seasonal?
No,
Okay.
they are not.
Okay, so those numbers should be.
Well, I believe to some extent, like thresholds tends to have other funding they use up first before they hit our funding, but I mean, I don't think that's the case this year because they're already, they've already gone through a significant amount of our funding.
Okay.
So I'm not sure that's still the case.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure that we're not, because that math could be a disadvantage, like if there was a year that like NISRA came to us or something, right? They would show nothing at this point, so, okay. And then Connie, I just wanted to make sure I understood your feedback. I thought I heard you say that you liked the idea of the 68%, but you really also talked about the IDD. Could you clarify for me if you did want to prioritize 100% of the 2 IDD requests, or if you wanted it to be equalized amongst all of the applicants that staff are recommending? Can you press your button?
I am just in favor of their recommendation, which does increase the warrant of need. If Pioneer is saying they can serve 10 more people, that's good. And Clearbrook can serve the people they're serving. This is what I'm getting the calls on. These are what I'm getting the letters on, that their children are sitting at home waiting to get into the program because we have not funded as much money as they need to serve their children.
So just to be clear, though, I believe that, the conversation around serving 10 additional people would be at the full request, not at the 68%. So in this column where they did the priority of the IDD, they funded the 2 programs at 100% of their requested amount, which then reduced the amount that would be available for the remaining ones. So I just want to be
I'm not seeing that.
So
clear.
So Carolyn, the number at 70% would be $460,800.
No.
instead of the other program,
$600, so we'd be
Getting-
$1,858 short.
59.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm sure I can find $2,000 if that's.
that's what I'm in favor of.
Okay.
Okay, so so let her.
Linda's going to say what I'm in favor of. Go ahead. You
Linda,
can
press
say-
your
you can
press your
say it
button,
better.
Linda.
You can say it better than that.
You're here. Let's hear what you got.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you are in favor of funding IDD and then reducing the amount for the other programs to the 59%.
Right.
Okay. So a preference towards the IDD programs based on the needs that we've
The
heard.
needs are there, I mean, totally.
Okay. And so it sounds like just through crunching the numbers, if we were crafting an additional column option, we would use 70% of the projected number that we have for the eligible programs. And that would be the number we would use that would keep us within the budget that we actually have for our mid-year allocations. So that's not, and obviously that would not be correct if we were giving 100% to the 2 IDD programs. So could I get a little more discussion or feedback from Ray or Carolyn on any opinions on the IDD programs being funded at a higher amount? Oh, you disappeared, Carolyn.
I was going to let Ray jump in.
Somebody press their button. There we go.
Like I've talked a lot, so.
Go ahead, Carolyn. Yeah.
I don't, but I also, I really don't, because I feel like, I think we get the calls on both. I mean, I feel like I don't want to pit one service against the other as far as the need, because I feel like they're different, but they're very much of need in both. So that's why I guess I kind of just am sticking with the thought of whatever staff is projecting, the need that's going to be there, and then equally distributing that over, what fits our budget.
Okay. Thank you. Ray?
That's good that I had you go first. I totally concur. I think that it's more fairness and optics to the public that we take that 70% and just net it against them all equally.
You're saying 70% equally among everything that we've said we'd fund.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. I just know,
Can you press your button, please?
I agree with you and Carolyn, I just know the need is out there for the DD. I get it all the time. And I'm not saying there isn't other needs, but they are not being served if we don't give them money for warrant of need. They're not being served.
I think I generally agree with Carolyn and Ray. I think the one sort of sparkling, shining opportunity for me is when an agency says, hey, this money that you give us, and we project that it'll allow you to continue a warrant of need for 36 clients, but by having this guaranteed, we also think that we can come up with 10 additional clients. That catches my attention specifically for that program versus not the concept of picking any type of program or any type of service, but when any applicant comes forth and says, hey, we think we can, do double, what with the money that you're going to give us than we usually would. And I know that caught, Mel's attention, and she talked with Frank about that to confirm that it wasn't a misunderstanding. that tends to catch my attention as an opportunity that I don't know that I want to miss. So, for me, and quite honestly, between the two IDD programs, that's the one with the bigger ask. So, the question for me would be, if we gave less, right, is that number 5 additional people that they're going to serve, 7 or 0, right? Is it going to be proportionately the same? I don't understand how it can't not be, but we also don't understand how they're going to even do it, which that then leads me to feel like it's an incomplete application or explanation. And I'm a little uncomfortable to then just assume that people can do something that we can't understand how they're going to do. So, I wish I had better information on that one, I guess, is the one thing that I will say on that. So, and then a question I have about that for staff is, if somebody makes a commitment to do something like that, are we increasing our audits? Are we increasing, is this a new work plan? What happens when somebody's kind of saying they can do something that doesn't totally add up for us?
I'm not sure that it would require a new work plan. I mean, we'd update the expected client count, and then we'd expect to see those increases. But, I mean, it could just be that they reduce services for the other 36 to add more people. I really don't know how else they would accomplish that plan.
Okay.
So,
Okay. I'm sorry, are you down there? Yep, sorry. Carolyn?
No, I just wanted to clarify, too, as we're running through the numbers. Can you go back, because in Connie, you had said column A.
Well, that's what the staff is recommending.
Well, but the IDD is in columns, in recommendation C, prioritizes the IDD.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
I think she was just confused. She was
confused.
saying column C, I believe,
Yes.
was her
Okay,
preference.
so, because that's where I'm trying to do, the comparisons of, because some of them are higher and some of them are lower, and some it doesn't really make a huge difference, is why I actually ask. I mean, so we're kind of saying similar things, but I mean, fundamentally, I like to have a reason. I mean, I'm kind of with Ray, I like there to just be kind of a foundational reason as to why you make those decisions that's easy to explain. So really the ones that it makes the biggest difference are on that, there is on the Clearbrook, the Clearbrook Choice Program, it's $9,000 is the difference. It's $20,300 if you do it with the 70%, and it's $29,000 if you use column C. And then on it makes a difference in some of the mental health ones. But if you just do the IDD, assuming it's really just those two that you're looking at, the
Yes.
Pioneer Center one then. So it's $87,500 versus $125,000. So I guess, I don't know, it's getting them higher than that column A is why I asked. They're still,
Right.
except for the one in Clearbrook, it's $5,000 difference. But for the most part, they're still higher than that column A. But I guess I don't know that I feel comfortable without not opposed to maybe taking a deeper dive before our next meeting or continuing the conversation to see if we're wanting to take, that money from mental health services and put it into IDD.
But how much would you put into IDD? How much more that you would take away from mental health services?
Well, that's what I'm saying. You're suggesting to take, 9,000 at least from the one, and then it would be about 25,000 from another one, I think, if I'm doing it right, if I'm looking at the right ones.
So it would be the
So-
same concept, if I'm understanding. We would just, if you wanted to fund those two programs 100%, instead of 70%, everything would end up a lower percentage for the rest of everybody that's left over.
All I'm saying is, whatever you guys decide, they've worked really hard on coming up with this, okay? Whatever column we need to make a decision on the $400,000 we have. I know that all the services we do are important, but the calls I get from Dee Dee's parents of children sitting at home because they can't get in anywhere because there's no money in Clearbrook or Pioneer because they're funded by warrant and need. And I think I shared one of the letters, and I could share a couple more letters with you from families, that's an important need because they're sitting at home with nothing. It's not like counseling. It's not like, I mean, it's a day program. It's a warrant of need.
And I don't disagree that the need is there. I mean, I absolutely don't disagree. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, I get it, it's there. But I also don't want to dismiss the fact that, mental health services too
Oh,
are in
sure.
strong need here. So I don't know that I want to make that decision on which one to choose, because it depends on what family you're talking to, that it's their priority. And it breaks my heart to even have to try to decide. That's why I just thought, taking what was shown where the gap would be and then taking the equal 70%, I guess that was easier for me to not make that choice. And I'm not dismissing the fact that there is extreme need in both of those areas. I'm just, to me, it
You're
puts
saying
that
take 70% of what they're asking.
No, of what staff has determined was the actual projected utilization.
Just give everybody a percent, it comes out to 68%.
Okay.
And Carolyn has suggested that some of them may not need that much.
Okay.
And so based on what staff projected, if we go with that, then they can get 70%
Oh,
instead of
okay.
68.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and it would
some
be, so it would be using some formula based on projection, and then just taking what we could afford.
Okay.
Sorry if I'm.
I don't know, that's just me. And I'm not gonna,
I'm not understanding.
Yeah.
and I am not gonna debate anyone on their philosophy, because the need is there. I mean, so, but that's just kind of the process my engineering brain uses, so, thank you.
I think, and not that I believe everything requires a precedent, but I do think that it's a useful model to use to say, here are the qualified applicants. Staff have done a good job of, determining who makes sense for us to do this. Of those, what is our staff's projected need? And quite honestly, like, if it's off, then we know year after year, that they need to give us better information as to why it's off or if it's seasonal. But this would be a way to, it would be a formula that could be easily replicated every single mid-year moving forward. And it takes out any, is it mental health? Is it IDD? Is it substance? It just says, these are all verified needs. We verify them. We know that they're going to be utilized. This is the pot of money that we have. And, divide it, and the percentage will change every single year, depending on the number of applicants and requests and the amount of, funds we have available. But I like that process. It's, quite honestly, it's pretty close to the first column, the 68% column. It's just a slight tweak that I don't think would be too terribly hard to do, right, Mel? Yeah.
I've already done it.
I was going to say, I'm sure it was like, you could copy paste that and show it to us. And I just want to share my strong opinion that we should always stay within our budget. I think it's really interesting, though, to get the information that there was about $200,000 in requests that staff felt were really valid. Because, as we, to your point, every application cycle, we can use a number like there was $20 million in requests, right? But, when we really shave it down, like, we can sit here and say at the mid-year allocation point, like, we are shy $200,000 that we really feel would have made a lot of sense, which is a sad spot to be in, and yet any decision we go to take money out of our fund balance is just money that we won't have another year. So, is there any further, sorry, Ray, let me hand it over to you.
Joe, could you move it over to column Q? I think the one thing that gets me is when we're looking again, if we could pull it down, so line number 7, or row 7, where we're seeing 10 additional clients, I understand that that would be great, but this would really drive down the most on thresholds. And if we look at the comment for thresholds, this program provides services for high-need clients that either have no funding. And so I believe that the across-the-board adjustment is much more preferable. Because we're talking about adding 10 new people as opposed to helping current people as well. So I would,
Well, yeah, and thresholds are taking on more because now they're federally.
and they're asking for more, obviously,
Well,
too.
and they're federally funded, so they do get more. I mean, it's now a community mental health center. They got that designation.
CCBHC
Yeah.
designation, yeah.
Which brought them in more money to serve the I'm not saying they're not important, but I'm saying they did bring in more money federally to serve those. They're all important.
They're all important.
$400,000, what are we going to do? Equally, that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I'll once again summarize what I've heard so far, so that, our recommendation is actually to use the numbers that are projected using our own information, and to come up with a percentage that each one can be distributed to fairly while staying within our $458,742 budget.
I just plugged in my computer that has those projections that Mel
Great.
has as well. So it's, yeah, it's O. That's 70% of
Where?
option B.
Oh, column O?
Yes.
Okay. So we're over budget by 1,857, which I'm sure we will find somewhere in the year.
Right.
Yeah, okay,
That makes sense.
yeah. I'd like to be able to take back our recommendation and via a vote. Is there any further discussion? No? Okay.
So you want a motion on O?
I guess a motion on O, yeah, I don't know what we're calling O. We can have I'll look at Carolyn, she's great with words with these things. Why don't you press your button, see what you come up with?
I'll make a motion to recommend to the full board that we do take the staff recommendations and multiply it by 70% to allow for the new allocations recommended, which is column O on
Staff
your.
recommendation B.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just say which
So
letter.
recommendation B, and then 70% of recommendation B.
Recommendation B.
Thank you.
Second?
Second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? No, let's put it to a vote, please. All right. All votes are in as a yes. Motion passes. Okay. So now we're going to move on to 6C, the Child Advocacy Center capital funding request.
Can I, before we go on, can we get a copy of O? Because it's not on here. Can it just be sent out to me so I have it?
Yes, Bridget said she will do that.
Okay, that's all. Go ahead.
Great. So the Child Advocacy Center capital funding request came in, and it is in your packet. As it stands right now, given the mid-year allocations, we don't have
Money.
any money to support this, so a decision to support this would require us finding funds elsewhere or dipping into fund balance. So I wanted to open it up for discussion to,
Could I have a,
I'd like to open it up to Mel to tell us what she thinks. Yeah.
so Bev might be able to help us on this, but I don't know if they've explored financing that remaining 135,000, because I did talk to Misty, and she asked, if they had a mortgage, could we help support that? And I said, yeah, we do support occupancy, so they could put that in their, funding application for the future if they did have means of financing that 135,000 to, still be able to use the county funding and only have to finance a portion of it. She also said they had, they could explore other grant opportunities and private donors. So I'm just throwing that out there, that could potentially be, one way we could support them is if they did get a mortgage, to have them put occupancy into their budget to help cover that mortgage expense. So just throwing that out there as an option.
Just so I'm understanding, that would be in next fiscal year? Okay, all right. Gotcha. Bev, do you have anything to add? If you do, can you go up there for me, please? And then you got to press your button.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bev.
So the fund balance for capital funds doesn't really exist for capital funds? I don't mean that to sound like negative, I'm just asking. I'm being Misty here.
Yeah.
I'm not being Bev of the old days of the Mental Health Board. Can you explain a little bit about that to me so that I will be able to explain it to my board?
Sure, yeah. So it just means that in our current fiscal year budget, we don't currently have any additional dollars within this fiscal year's budget, which would require that our board would make a decision to fund any request at this point, whether it was any type.
So your capital fund doesn't really exist, like from year to year that you build up and you have dollars available for capital projects?
We don't have something specifically earmarked for capital projects.
Okay.
It is inclusive of capital projects and fee-for-service providers.
And you are able to, if you had dollars in the capital fund, you are able to move those into fee-for-service?
They're
Or-
not separate. Yeah, we don't have them
They're not really
named in
separate.
that way. Yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
I get it.
When we approve the allocations during the allocation process, capital projects are put forward, and so that's how the funding goes.
Right.
There's not a separate line.
Yeah,
It's all one.
it's all one. Yeah.
Okay, I do understand that. Let me just tell you a little bit about, I understand that perfectly. I just want you to know how we got to the point that we are at. And I never, historically, I've never been a bricks and mortar kind of person over people and services. So I understand this perfectly. We had a building that was on Route 47 that was Harding Realty, and that's where we were until about 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And literally, Kunis car dealership started tearing down the building while we were still in it. And we had floods, we had, the floor would bubble up because of what they were doing, and they were knocking out an office at a time, and they kept coming closer to us. The parking lot that was ours, we had to use cones to block off parking spots for staff and more for board meetings or if clients were coming in. And literally, they would come at 6 o'clock in the morning and move our cones off to the side, and we'd get to the parking lot, and our cones would all be in the back of the lot. So we started looking for building space. We looked here, and we needed more space, and we need a separate entrance, and those kinds of possibilities here were not available at that time. And we looked at other agencies, we looked out, at the county. I mean, literally, I went to 51 different properties trying to find something. And this one building, very, near your old building, was available at the corner of Crystal Lake Avenue and Route 14. And it was a former chiropractor's office. And it had been for sale for a long time. Well, a friend of a friend of a friend literally jumped in at the last minute with less than 24 hours' notice and bought the building for us to rent. And of course, that's Nico Canicaris. And say what you want about his food or his restaurants, he has a huge heart. And he really, literally saved the day because we had nothing and we were going to have no place to go. So fast forward to today, we want to buy the building. And that's the best use of our money. It's the best use of any money that we get donated. And so we have tried. We're not very good at the fundraising thing. We have a very small staff, and you can only raise so much at, bags, bourbon, and bingo. I mean, that's not the kind of money we need. So that was why we came to you, as we've gone to many other places. We're very fortunate in that the county is allowing us to use those ARPA dollars. I guess I'm being overly gracious for that because there's no reason why they shouldn't, but we are using the ARPA dollars for the majority of the funding. So we now just have to look for that gap of $135,000. So if you hear of anything or anybody who wants to jump in, we're good for it. We're going to be around for a really long time. We do really, really important work. And the growth of the Child Advocacy Center in the last several years to become part of the Behavioral Health Network, thanks to the staff and the board that are here, really welcomed us with open arms, in addition to being part of the law enforcement and state's attorney network as well. We really are a unique agency that is part of everything. And this is just my chance to say thank you to all of you, thank you to the staff, and thanks to the rest of the board for allowing that to happen. Let me know if you know where we can find some money.
Bridget, do you have a question?
Can we suggest that we hook our grant writer up with them to see if there's any grant opportunities?
Yeah, I think that would be
Yeah, we
great.
don't have a grant writer per se. We have Misty. And,
Right.
right. And that would be wonderful. And in the meantime, we will, the county said that we can arrange a loan with them. And time is of the essence. We have promised the owner of the building that we will try to make this happen as fast as we can. He's been hanging on for a while, so.
We can reach out to him tomorrow and connect the two, so.
Misty has gone all week.
Okay.
To Peoria, to this conference.
Okay.
But you can also, like they said, add it
I'm sorry?
in your application for funding, put in occupancy, and we will refund occupancy.
Absolutely. We will do that.
Yeah.
We will do that for sure. So thank you very much.
1 second, Bev. Carolyn has a question.
And so am I clear in reading this correctly that with the remaining unallocated funds, or the remaining allocated funds that you're going to utilize for the rest of the year? You won't have any that will go unallocated?
We're not expecting that there will be a lack of utilization of those dollars.
Okay.
And we're very appreciative of that.
I just was looking at opportunities to maybe switch it, if that was a possibility. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I know that our budget is relatively small, but we have some wonky funding sources. It's And a lot of it is up in the air right now, as far as what, what we will have available. Some we can use for, we could use for rent, but we can't use for a mortgage.
Sorry, I turned off. But yeah, that's kind of why I asked the question. Because I do think, if it's there to be used, I mean, I personally don't have a problem switching that around if you need to switch it around, if that's an option. And maybe it's a question that needs to come back, and then we could, understand the varied sources and how things need to be done. So if we need to, I'm willing to work in that realm.
I think, we're going to continue this conversation, but, connecting Misty with staff when she's back about any alternative, brainstorming options. I mean, I think the spirit of supporting you is something the board all is in alignment with. It's just a matter of, are there any creative ways to, to do that? So, yeah.
Yeah, we would like to get out from under, a loan from the county, if we possibly could, even though they've been great, and we appreciate it. But those dollars should be used for something else.
Yeah.
But it's a great building. If you've never been there, come by. It is warm and welcoming. Every child who comes in, no matter what time of the day or night, and believe me, it is different times of the day or night, never walks away without a blanket, a stuffed animal, snacks, pillow, clothes. We've got everything going there. And it really is full service. I cannot say enough about our staff. They are amazing. And to face the topics that they face every time somebody walks in through the door is pretty astounding. So we're very proud. Thank you very much. If you have any questions or anything, people know how to find me, so please do.
Thank you, Bev.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know a lot of mics are on. Is there any further discussion that anyone would like to have on the capital funding request? Go ahead, Connie. Yeah.
Well, I think that we need to hook up our grant writer. We need to look at funding, occupancy, but at this time, we just don't have the money for capital. I mean, it's for this project. But any way that we can help them, I think we should help them. Whether, it's like Carolyn said, if they aren't using some of the money, maybe we could force it that way. So I guess I'm making, I guess you need a motion not to fund this, but to help them in any way we can and get our grant writer, who really, their program would be great to write a grant for.
Is there any other discussion? So what I'm hearing is that as a finance committee, we're not making a recommendation to fund this capital project at this time, and to direct our staff to connect with their staff about all available options, and to connect them with our grant writer.
Do you need a motion for that?
I do not believe we need a motion to not fund something, so
Okay.
to not,
Okay,
to
I
make a
just didn't know if you
recommendation not to. Yeah,
Okay.
okay. All right, then we will move on to item 6D, which is future sales tax discussion. Let me turn this off. Mel, did you want to jump in here?
No? Well, I guess I will.
I was going to say, I was like, I don't really remember this one, yeah. Connie, can you turn on your microphone?
I just got that letter from Dave, and I wanted to share it with you because he's saying that when we basically run out of money, which from our fund balance, from what you said, will be about 2028. Am I right?
No. The current forecasting template, I believe, has us reducing our fund balance until 2031, and then we go up in 2032, meaning sales tax catches up in 2032 if we flat fund through 2031.
Okay, but it's not to fund any new it's more or less flat funding with our fund balance. all I'm bringing to your attention is what he brought to my attention. And we also have another, and I talked to Peter Austin some weeks ago, that when a new executive director is hired, we can also have them, her, him, whoever, work with the state to get more sales tax. So I'm just saying we need to look to the future at some point in time. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention what he wrote to me.
I know when I had this conversation, I very much feel like the presentation, at least that I did to the county finance, was that I think we will be in a significantly better position kind of 2 years out from the beginning of the sales tax, with data that is updated and a better forecasting of if, when we will in fact have a problem. Because obviously this forecasting template is got a lot of best guesses at this point, right? And I do think that within that time frame, if there is state-based legislation that does change, which I know some of our, like ACMI and different, there's different people doing things, moving things, trying to make changes. And I know that Peter Austin showed us the article around sales tax and how it's slightly outdated from its original, purpose and understanding. So I do think that there is potentially some state-based legislation that could be coming down the pipeline. So, I mean, my stance on this is that we are in a healthy position as long as we do not take from our fund balance in large amounts of money. We are in a healthy position to be able to keep things stable, and certainly stable for 2 years, and that still gives us enough time that if we wanted to consider a conversation with county officials about a sales tax referendum, that I think it would be more evidence-based at that time, that there could be additional need. Carolyn.
Yeah, and I wanted to just echo your comments because I thought we were, while I appreciate the information, I think too it points out that we do have a couple years still before we really have to, either put forth a request to the board to put a referendum on there or support it. And I also think that our discussions have been allowing kind of that 2 years to really see where the sales tax puts us and what position we are put in, because really it's not even having 1 year under, it's really hard to even make any sort of a projection. And you're right, Lindsay, there's a lot of discussions at the state, the modernization, sales tax. I just spoke, there's a lot of people advocating for that right now. I don't know if it's a reality or not, but, giving 2 years, we'll probably know if it's going to be a reality or not, and that would affect us. Positive or negative, I mean, depending on how it's changed. So hopefully in the positive. But those discussions are definitely being had and advocated for at the state level. So I just think it would be premature to make any decisions. And I think the county, what is it, Bridget, you might know, is it 90 days that they would need to put a referendum on? Yeah, so that would, even if they did February of 2027, we don't have, we have still at least another year before we'd have to make any sort of decision in that, and if we went to the general of 2027, we have even far more than that. So putting it on pause for a bit, I think would be a smart thing to do.
And that's all I wanted to do is just bring it to, not to want any kind of action, but bring it to your attention, because part of me says, there might be new programs we want to fund, there may be other things, and we're looking at sustaining what we have, but not increasing anything new. So I think down the road, we need to have historical data for sure, and I agree with you, but we do need to keep our eye on the prize, as they say, in the future. That's all. And I just wanted to share you his thoughts. That's all I wanted to do.
Any further discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, our next regular meeting is Tuesday, June 24th, 2025. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?